Mordechai, we were speaking, you and I, Lowell, before Frank got here. We were talking about just people waking up and people in Israel, people in America. I don't know what he was referring to specifically. Maybe people in Israel. And I'm wondering now that everything kind of everybody could see what's going on, and everybody could see that. I mean, as much as Bibi talks big about finishing the job and not capitulating to these beasts or whatever it is. It just seems like everything is still very, very snail-like. If they really, I know Israelis. I know the Israeli government. I know the Israeli bureaucracy. We have a phrase in Russian, "Когда ты хочешь, ты можешь." When you want, you're able to. So I conclude that they don't want. I know they're able to, but they don't want. It would have been over months ago. This whole thing would have been over months ago. We would have avoided this whole six kids, these dead bodies, those dead bodies, these six people, negotiations. Just today, Hamas came out with, okay, here's our terms. You know, you guys leave, you stop the war, you release all our prisoners, and we give you back whoever you want, whoever we have, whether it's the person is dead or alive. It's like the chutzpah, but they're only able to have this chutzpah because we've allowed it. So now the question is, it's a rhetorical question, really. Did we allow it because we are stupid? Or as Rabbi Mizrahi likes to say, we're the dumbest nation on earth? Or we're deliberately allowing it? And Israelis seem to be it's like a veil that's covering their face. And I don't know. It's something, it's mysterious.
Well,
Yeah.
let me make a suggestion. We should always, everything should always come back to the Torah, which is our guide. And I thought that we should begin today's discussion with the Torah reading of this week, and the one that happens to be of today, of Thursday,
Sure.
the fifth day, and the fifth portion, and it discusses the refuge city. A refuge city is there were three refuge cities set aside by divine command for unintentional manslaughter. Somebody unintentionally kills someone. So in those days, things were much more clear cut, and things were much there was much more of a sense of justice. And the close relative of somebody who was killed, who was taken out of this world before his time, was called something that was called the Goel Hadam, or the Blood Avenger, and he had the right to take the life of somebody who killed his close relative in order to save an unintentional, maybe someone who killed through negligence, or maybe there wasn't even negligence there. But there's a certain period for having had taken a life, however unintentionally, where a person has to have some sort of expiation, kapara, some sort of atonement. And he would live in one of these three cities that were set aside for an unintentional manslaughter until a certain time, and then he will have finished his term of atonement. Whereas if, and it says specifically, this is today's Torah portion, if somebody intentionally murdered someone, if there were feelings of hatred beforehand, and it turns out that someone is coming and running to the city of refuge only to save himself from the blood avenger, but really he doesn't have a right to be there because he's not an unintentional manslaughterer, but he was actually an intentional killer. So then the Torah describes a process of extradition where the person is given over to the blood avenger. And the Torah says, Lo tachos einecha elav, do not be compassionate on him. Ubiarta dama nakim Yisrael v'tovlach. And then you will have cleansed out the clean blood, meaning innocent blood that was killed in the Jewish people, and it will be good for you. It's a very interesting question. Why does it say that one should not show any compassion to him? And Rashi explains there, and it's a situation that Rashi says that's something that I could picture, and I think that we could all picture happening today. I can picture the headlines, I can picture the entire situation. Let's imagine turning on the news and hearing about somebody who ran 3 months ago to a refuge city, claiming that a life that he took was unintentional, but then it came out, new evidence emerged, that actually there was some sort of a sikhsukh, some sort of a disagreement or a fight or a feud between these two. And the more the information comes out and the more investigation is done, it turns out that it was not an unintentional killing, but it was an intentional killing. And so the heads, the elders or the leaders of the refuge city would then begin the process of giving him over to be killed by the blood avenger. Now Rashi says, why does it say don't show compassion on the murderer? Shelo tomar harishon kvar nerag. That we shouldn't say the first Jew died already. We already had one death. End the madness. Lama anu horgim esazeh. Why do we kill also this one? V'nimseinu shnei Yisrael harugim. And now there are two Jews killed, right? I can imagine the mass movements and the demonstrations and all of the things, and of course that's what people would say today, because the basis of Western civilization is twisted morality, is a sort of a compassion which goes in every direction except the direction where it has to go. So we have to kind of look in, this is just one little example of something that if we look back in the Torah portions for the past, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 weeks, how long has it been since Balak? The Torah commands us to commit genocide. The Torah commands us to meet collective punishment on populations. The Torah commands us to perform ethnic cleansing, and for some reason, we're so removed from these concepts, from what these things mean. And it's really, I have to apologize for labeling these commandments according to the modern labels, which remove them of all content and also remove them of all the logic and all of the reasoning behind this way of life. But I think that we have a big problem today, that compassion is way twisted out of proportion. It's warped, and nobody wants to say a thing for what it is. When you come and ask me, are people waking up? Are people beginning to see the truth? So my question is, if I see people deciding to take action and to undo the damage that they did by either participating in democracy and putting these people in a position of power, and not watching the democracy, not caring for it, not treating it as anything more than a celebration of once in 4 years, and like fast food politics, fast food, you vote for somebody who promises you security and peace, and either you win or you lose, but no matter what, you bought into the system, and you signed off on its legitimacy, and now you have no reason to complain for the outcome of what happened. And we have a completely corrupt country and a corrupt system where the people who were attacked were approached. I mean, it's such a hard and cruel thing to say, and I'm mixing a lot of things in because it's a very emotional subject, but I don't see anybody talking about it. I don't see anybody. I spoke to people who were kicked out of Gush Katif, and they performed a mass effort to reach all of the Israelis. They sent out emissaries to all the main cities, but especially to those areas surrounding Gush Katif, to try to convince them that we, the residents of the Gaza Strip, the Jewish residents of the Gaza Strip, are living here for ideological reasons, not reasons for a pleasant life, or for having nice gardens, or all the things that they tried to tell the Israeli public. We're here because we want to protect you, the kibbutzim and the communities surrounding Gush Katif. And they treated them like strangers, and they did not listen to them, and they rejected them, and they said that they would support, and they did support the expulsion. I myself, during that day, saw a very unsavory character expressing great pleasure while he was listening to the radio and hearing what was happening to the Jews. So if somebody sticks his finger on the electric socket and he gets electrocuted, do you say that he's getting punished? Do you say it's a punishment? I mean, I'm not saying that the people who suffered what they suffered on Simchas Torah on October 7th were being punished. I don't think that it's in the realm of punishment. I think it's in the realm of cause and effect. Well, of course, this was going to happen because they removed the one buffer and the one thing that had the army inside the Gaza Strip and in control of the security situation to some extent, at least, and that was the presence of Jewish residents, of Jewish citizens living there. And when they took them out, there was only one reason and one possible thing that could have come out of that, and it did come out of it. But I think it's even worse than that. And I want to say something else. I want to drop a link in the chat. Let me just see here. I might have to just get the link. Let's see here. Here you go. This is a YouTube video that I don't know if everybody is familiar with. I'm dropping it here. Copy it because I don't know if it's going to be available after we close this show. This is a 4-part YouTube series, and I'm really frankly surprised it still exists on YouTube. If anybody's able to download it, that would probably be a good thing. And what it is, it's an expose of the role of the leaders of the settlement movement in lying to, defrauding, fooling the people who wanted to go and save their brothers in Gush Katif. And basically, they neutralized all opposition in coordination with the police, cynical coordination with the police, meaning you see on this video actual footage of them staging their own arrest in order to make it look like they were actually doing something effective for the people. We've got a big problem. So if you come and ask me, do I think people are waking up and do I think that people are really beginning to see what's going on here? There's only one thing that's going to show me that people are starting to wake up, and that is if they decide to actually take action to disassociate themselves from the actions of their government that in one way or another, either actively or through default, we've all been supporting. If being awake means just sharing asinine articles that are CIA disinformation propaganda anyway on so-called awake groups and forums and discussions, and the purpose of all these articles is just to keep everybody in constant fear and keep everybody in some kind of a mode of thought that it's too late for us to fix anything. 30 years ago when I exposed the acquiescence of the Israeli government in Palestinian Authority first strike preparations in Judea and Samaria. The worst thing were the people who just took it with panic and said, "Well, it's too late. It's all done, and there's nothing for us to do about it." Okay, the preparation for the attack, the method of the attack, who they used for the espionage, everything that happened in the South, I wrote there in that document almost 30 years ago. And instead of saying, well, we're doomed and it's too late and there's nothing we can do, and, too bad you didn't write the report 10 years ago. No, let's do something now. I mean, let's protest the action of our government. Let's protest the action of the American government. If you're an American citizen, then your State Department, your CIA, and mine too, because I'm an American citizen, forced Israel to stand down and be attacked. And are okay, we're shocked. Okay, it's taken us a year to kind of we've been subject to worse than psychological warfare, but fear campaigns for years. Once I was a news anchor for a great radio and TV news outlet called Israel News Talk Radio, and I've been listening to my own podcast, my own newscasts from 5 years ago, and things that were happening. And it's an exercise that people don't do. News is a thing. It's like something to wrap your fish in. Today's news and yesterday's news is already, people don't even remember it because of the avalanche of garbage that they subject everybody to. But if you go back and listen to what was happening then, what was happening with the Gaza tunnels, what was happening with the incendiary balloons that were burning the South, what was happening with the billions of dollars that were coming into Gaza from Qatar, and what with the approval of the Israeli government, with the approval of Prime Minister and Defense Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, right, and all of his campaign promises, and the tunnels in the South, and the tunnels in the North, and Hezbollah, and everything that's been happening. And you hear all of their bravado and all of their boasting of their technological placebos. And, well, we just conducted another maneuver and we just developed another technology that's going to, it's all we saw where all of it is. So now, let us realize that there are certain things that, however cruel they are, but they must be said, because if we don't say them, then we're just going to suffer more of the same. It's crucial. And that's one of the things. That's the first thing. So again, everybody should really take down the link of that video that I just dropped there and familiarize yourselves with some of the history of the expulsion of the Jews from Gush Katif, which was the reason and the facilitator for what happened last year on Simchas Torah, and to realize that it's the role of the leaders, whether it's the national leaders, whether it's our local leaders, that makes these things and allow these things to happen. It's blatant corruption, and it's something that we have to do something about. And it's going to take a lot more than just talking to each other in forums of support groups. So yeah.
Mordechai, so to follow up
Yes.
kind of, and I'll let maybe Frank chime in. You mentioned protests and people have to protest. I'm a kind of a Johnny come lately when it comes to Aliyah. I made Aliyah in 2010. I feel like there was a lot of things happening in Israel from even before its founding. And so maybe I just don't have my pulse on Israeli society as much as I think I do. But I remember, and I wasn't there, but I remember reading about it. Moshe Feiglin started this organization called Zor Tzenu in the 90s. And when I read his book, Where There Are No Men, he talks about how he organized these nationwide protests at the circles, at the kikars all over the country.
I was yes.
I would imagine. So I don't. What is going on with that, specifically that community, maybe, or I guess the Dati Leumi, or just a broader community that feels the same way as the people who protested at those circles back then. But what is stopping these people from doing that today? What happened to the Israelis?
I'll tell you what happened to the Israelis. What happened to the Israelis was the systematic, they call it in Hebrew, ridifa. After the killing of Yitzhak Rabin, there were many people who benefited greatly from the killing of Yitzhak Rabin. And one of the things that happened, it was the beginning, is that the right, the so-called right, especially the religious right in Israeli society, no longer was able to open their mouths, no longer was able to say anything, lest they be accused in the media and on the street and in the shopping mall and in the bus of having had done or said or thought something that contributed to the climate in the country before the assassination of the prime minister. So that was the beginning, and that was the beginning. I mean, it was so bad. It was to the extent that if there were actual arrests of people for having named their child Yigal in a bris in the days and weeks following the assassination, because the person who was credited with killing the prime minister is named Yigal Amir, and so allegedly, and so it was a very, very, very scary situation. I mean, if any of us remembers, if any of us walked into a shopping mall boldly without a face mask, right in the middle of 2021 or the beginning of 2022, so maybe a little bit of what the feeling was to walk around as a religious Jew in the days and weeks following the killing of Yitzhak Rabin, and that was just the beginning. What happened was that there were several takedowns of Jewish communities, which were done in an extremely brutal fashion. New uniforms, new stormtrooper uniforms were made specifically for the police who carried these things out. There were certain under Olmert, I believe under Olmert's reign, there was one in Amona where the police actually brought steel rods, and some of the boys were sterilized there, horses and steel rods. I mean, the most horrible things. And the religious public has been the subject from, on the one hand, that, on the other hand, a leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, who appears to me the perfect American CIA asset. He's positioned perfectly in that he has the entire Israeli left in their role, attacking him constantly, which keeps him always in the position that his public, the people who he's intended to deliver to this process, the Israeli right and the Israeli religious, are constantly defending him because of the egregious attacks that are taking place from the left. So the whole thing is perfect. So we're not able to see, or we're not able to admit that he's been lying to us all along, talking big and getting elected through promises like he will apply sovereignty to all of the settlements without exception. That was a more recent one. A less recent one was that he would never cede the concept of reciprocity or to release terrorists with blood on their hands. And he went to the Y Y plantation, and he did everything that he said he wasn't going to do over Shabbos, so that there wasn't able to be any protest. After Shabbos, all the Israelis turned on their radios and TVs, and they found out that it was done already. It was a done deal. Bibi and Ariel Sharon said we had no choice, but of course they did have a choice. The choice was that they could have gotten on TV and said they are subjecting me to this and this and this pressure. I cannot or will not withstand the pressure. This is what they want me to do, but I will not give away this or this, whatever they're demanding from me, and I resign. They could have had it in their resignations, but that's the whole purpose of being a politician is to concentrate and maintain power. So for somebody to actually do that would take a very, very special individual in politics. So I think that it it has to be, all of us exist because God wants us to exist, and there isn't one single one of us who is here because he's extra. Okay, we had illustrious ancestors that we read about, but they're not on the stage right now. We're the ones who are on the stage right now. Those of us who have American passports, we have tremendous power if we would use it. If we would even decide to get together and sit down and think of ways to use it. I've been suggesting the most, citizenship suicide, burning your passport. But if you don't want to do that, if you can think of something else, some other effective way that would be more than mere symbolism and more than just a mere protest, because if you think that you're going to fix the situation of danger to life that exists in this country by using the means that they've given us in democratic countries, protest, petitions, the courts, your congressman, so then you need to get over that naivete. That's not what's going to save us. These things are all rigged. They've been rigged a long time. If there's such a thing as a judge who belongs to a secret society, so then that means that in that country there is no justice system. The whole thing has to be taken down and built up again. Because if there's a judge who recognizes somebody, then there's no more judge, and there's no more justice, and there's no more anything. Well, the entire world, we know the way it is. I don't have to bring those those details, because everybody knows it already. The only thing that I'm saying is I don't believe that just because people are in a war fever or in a war hysteria, until they start looking at our leaders and what our role is in maintaining them in power, I'm not going to believe that people are awake.
I mean, you mentioned that people are afraid to come out because of this whole thing with Rabin, and it's kind of like, it's gone all the way till today. But to me, it's like I'm looking at this and I see that 90% of Israelis are you know, not in agreement with what the people in Tel Aviv, for example, did a couple of days ago. So if they see that the people in Tel Aviv, or those types, have been coming out during the judicial reform and coming out a bunch of times during this war, what's coming out? What stops 90% of Israel from coming out one time? You're talking about millions of people,
The
overwhelming
newspaper,
the what?
the news media. What's preventing them from doing it is the education they received in the schools, and then the continuation of that education in the news media. When you graduate from high school, so then what it means is, okay, you're docile enough and you've been pacified enough, so you no longer need to sit in a classroom. It's enough to send you to some factory or some other horrible job somewhere, and with a supplemental jolt of propaganda in a newspaper, and then the people are basically where they want them. Newspapers deal in sensationalism. The newspapers that people like, what draws you? What is what's called today clickbait, right? It's something always that comes with the word shocking. You won't believe, some kind of a sordid story about murder, perversion, corruption, et cetera, et cetera. And why is that such an attraction to people? Because when people read about these things, they're able to put themselves in a much better perspective, and they can say, well, as bad as I am, I'm not as bad as that guy. And that's what the newspapers do. So the newspapers have the effect of bringing everybody down. Okay, they bring us down morally, and they also bring us down because, I mean, it's nothing new. Take a look through the newspapers in England before World War II, and all of everyone's talking about Churchill today. So let's talk about what the names that they called Churchill, the warmonger. and everybody wanted to believe Chamberlain that it was going to be an era of peace, and the newspapers did nothing to contribute to preparing the nation for the things that were to come. They're always too late because people don't like to rock the boat. It's the media. That's the reason. I mean, that's the reason. The answer, in short, to your question, what is it about the people here? It's the education, it's the propaganda, and it's the peer pressure. And we saw all of it come out during the years of COVID. It's very, very difficult. How are we going to get people to understand what happened here and what's happening militarily if they didn't understand what happened with COVID? How could they? If they don't understand that their prime minister was willing to subject them to an experiment which violated the Nuremberg Code and and caused who knows how many deaths and maimings, and people just they don't even realize that. So how are they going to be able to understand the agreements and the arrangements between the United States and Israel, and the strategies that they have to take us into globalism? There's another thing also that really is keeping people down, and that is fantasy entertainment. It's another thing. Our minds have been decayed and rotted by movies and Netflix and all the things out there, all the fantasies that give us a certain idea of good and evil. And good and evil doesn't look like that. Evil is not some witch who has a wart on her nose and she wants to look in the Star Trek movies and all the Star Wars movies. I'm not a Bucky, but evil is always portrayed as something that looks evil. It's never us, and it's never something much more prosaic and subtle and quiet, and it's just my laziness, and it's just my desire not to rock the boat, and for somebody not to think something not nice of me. That's all. That's enough evil to cause an avalanche of catastrophe on our heads. And we need to get ourselves out of these fantasies that they're selling us that make us maybe feel better about ourselves, because it takes the realm of evil and it stretches it way beyond anything that I touch. But that's not where it's at. We have to look at ourselves. We have to look at what the reasons are that we're not getting up and doing something about this situation that's going to, in the end, it's going to be our grandchildren who have to deal with it. We're going to leave this world eventually, all of us, and it's the kids who know nothing about what's going on and nothing about the history. And what's preventing us from standing up and doing something? Why are we just watching the news like we're spectators? We're not spectators. We're in this. We're personally endangered here. So why are we allowing our governments to screw us? That's my question.
To me or to Craig?
Frank, any comments?
Anyone who's unmuted.
I have a couple of comments. You guys said a mouthful, but I'm just trying to think how to water it down. Not water it down, how to boil it down. Watering down is bad. Boiling down sometimes can be good. Sometimes. The people in Gush Katif, and I think most Israelis in general, need to. This is something that must happen. I don't know what the best course of action is to make this happen, but it must have. They must realize that their parents are completely divorced from reality. That everything that their parents taught them and everything that the government has promoted is suicidal, and it's divorced from reality. It can only get everybody killed. They have to understand that their parents are that member in your household will open the door to that crazy homeless guy that's on the street, and at night when everybody's sleeping, because they're so divorced from reality that they think that if they just show kindness, or maybe if I just, you see that crazy, that crazy, bully drug dealer over there who just seems to hang out in that one corner. Maybe if I give him a ride alone in my car, to a nice place. He'll become a better person. No, he'll stab you to death, and he'll kill, and that crazy bum will come in and rob your family. Best case scenario, possibly cause serious physical harm to your sleeping family members. So that's who the Israeli unfortunately, most of the people who lived in the Gush Katif area, right outside of Gaza, right after the withdrawal, like those communities, right? That's who most of those people were. That's who most of the people who were abducted can be described in that way too. I don't think that what happened to them should have happened to them. I'm horrified. I don't think they deserved it at all. I'm not. I have my, I know that Hashem exists for sure. That's not a faith thing. I know the Torah is real, but I have a lot of personal difficulty with my relationship with God. I don't care how many mistakes they made to do something like that to anybody. How much more so my own people. It's not something that I can really be at peace with ever. Hopefully, never. But aside from that, that's who their parents were. The idiot, or the mentally incapacitated family member who will, whatever's going on in their mind, they're going to burn the house down and get everybody killed because they don't belong in charge, because they're not in touch with the reality. The reality is what history has taught us, that especially the Jewish people. So it's criminal ignorance. Ignorance should be literally criminal. I'm not trying to speak in flowery ways. I think ignorance should be penalized as a criminal act. You're not allowed to be ignorant. You can't just walk around the earth thinking that everything's gonna be fine and you don't need to learn what the deal is, so to speak, wherever you happen to find yourself, right? You think you're gonna, dress like you're gonna put some Sanskrit tattoos on your forearm and on your lower back, walk around with your midriff exposed somewhere in Nepal and not get raped and murdered. That's what a lot of Western women think is gonna happen. Their ignorance is criminal. Okay, so people need to understand that ignorance is criminal. It's a crime. You're not allowed to be stupid. You can't be self-imposed. You can't put self-imposed stupidity on yourself and expect that everything's going to be okay. I'm speaking to myself as well. I'm not talking out anybody. These are problems that I intimately familiar with personally. So I know I'm not the only one. Okay, so basically, until Israelis understand that their leaders are losers and their parents are not in touch with reality, except for maybe a handful of people in the world, right? So that has to happen. I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't have any recommendations for that, but that has to happen. Okay, and also until Israelis have to stop looking at religious people, right? And and judging Torah by what they are told religious people do and what they're like. Israelis have to ask an important question. What does the Torah say about dealing with this situation like this? Don't look at a yeshiva bacher picking his nose and judge the Torah. The Torah is yours, you idiots. You have to look at it. You can't just sit there and not know what it says and then pass judgments. That's how you get murdered. Because if you knew a little bit of Torah, our prophets, not that I'm a huge scholar, but I've heard recently, like Rabbi Weisberg, for instance, Isser Zalman Weisberg, I heard him refer to a prophecy, which I think it's either Yirmiyahu or Yeshayahu, maybe one of you gentlemen, where he says that if the Jewish people remove themselves from the Torah, you lose your wisdom. You're no longer smart. The Jewish people are only smart when they are connected to learn the Torah. You're not smart. You're not smart without the Torah. You're idiots. Look at what you've done That's why you're getting murdered, because you can't do a basic, simple, common sense thing. Without the Torah, you don't even have common sense if you're a Jew. Any Arab has more common sense than you. Okay.
Well, the thing is, we have it all. I'm sorry.
No. I'm just gonna. I'll wrap it up. I'll wrap it up. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say that again, we have to bring it down to how practically do we make these things happen. Like I agree that there's a change in consciousness that's to happen, but let's say, I issued a call to arrest Israel's past 5 education ministers who were responsible for the education of this generation, who were dancing around the Buddha statue on Yom Tov. It wasn't their fault. It was those who were charged with educating them. But we're not going to get a good education minister, just like we're not going to get a good defense minister or anything else, as long as we continue the way we are with Israel's democratic process. We saw Moshe Feiglin. You mentioned Moshe Feiglin. He tried to change it from the inside. They were able to neutralize him. It's anybody who tries to change it from the inside eventually gets taught a lesson, because the Likud is like Tammany Hall.
Mordechai, I
yeah.
just want to say that we never. What needs to be understood is Israel never had a democratic process. It's a whole. It's theater. It's a joke.
Oh, that's right. But everybody thinks it is. But everybody believes it in his heart's blood, and I see people getting more excited. People who call themselves religious get more excited with love and fear during the lead up to the climax of the elections than I ever see them getting excited around any kind of a Jewish religious anything, and that's including the fun mitzvahs like Hanukkah.
Thank God for that. That's God.
Thank God for what?
God might want to, he might want to chime in here every now and then, maybe give a little tiny bit of inspiration. But that's just me. Hold on. So, Mordechai, listen, Israel, we've learned recently, as probably a lot of this information came from you, that Israel doesn't have a democratic process. They have secular ayatollahs sitting in the Supreme Court. That's who makes all the real decisions. Okay, they control the margins of. It's like, what's his name? The Weinstein. He was on that podcast the other day. He was saying that, the deep state controls all the opinions up to one extreme and the other. There's a pre-approved framework for what your opinion could be. Anything outside of those bounds, they take you out. So that's what's been going on in Israel, obviously. So again, I guess I feel bad talking without having like any practical solutions, but I just know that Israelis have to understand that truth, and not in a subtle way, not in a slow way. It has to be very sudden, and they have to understand, oh my God, if we can't trust these people, they're going to get us killed. Like, how could you even consider giving back the Philadelphia corridor, whatever the hell that thing is? You have to be insane. Yes. People need to get to that simple kind of basic level of reality. Also, you mentioned how Israelis got to this point, and I was thinking about a metaphor, possibly the negative side of how it is perceived that Jacob treated his kids. Did we lose Mordechai?
I'm here. I don't know what happened just now to the camera, but I'm here. Oh, there we go.
So it's generally on a superficially perceived the story of Jacob and his 12 sons, that Jacob he liked and treated Joseph better than everybody else. He gave him special privilege, gave him special encouragement, right? So that's what. So there's obviously, we're talking about Jacob here. So obviously he did that for a reason, and I'm sure it was, sure is pretty essential. However, the negative side of that, or perhaps the negative way it can be perceived, is what the Israeli government has done with the Jewish people, whereas they demean, like you said, you can graduate from high school once you're cooked, and you can't ask, your critical reasoning skills are gone. You accept the narrative, and now you can go and stuff yourself into a cubicle or a factory all day long, living paycheck to paycheck, while the real people who are really running things and guiding the way, the left, the political class and all of their operatives, right? Who are encouraged and morally, who are, they're promoted, they're funded, they're given, they're given highest by the government. So that's why you have a very loud and aggressive leftist element inside of Israel that seem more motivated than everybody else, because they're encouraged. They're like the un-Yosef, like they're like the Yosef, from the side of the Sitra Achra that are.
Well, they're Marxist revolutionaries.
Well,
They have an ideology.
Yeah, that's what that
They have
is.
an ideology, and they believe that they have a world to conquer, a world to
Yeah.
free, a world to win.
Whatever they
And,
believe, yeah, that's true. But I'm just saying that one of the reasons why in Israel, at least, they seem more prone to act than 80-90% of the country, right? Who are not like them. So why are we sitting here so docile? It's because they've been bred to be aggressive, assertive, loud, and pushy and violent. We've been bred to not do that. So it takes.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a much longer process to get everybody I don't know what it's going to take to get regular people to finally, put down those.
Well, we got to start reading our Torahs and start taking it seriously.
I don't know how we're going to get to that. That's why I know we have to.
So I have a question based on what
I got one more thing. I got one more thing because you guys, you made some important comments, and I'll just say this. Netanyahu, right? Like you said several things about Netanyahu, which probably true. And there's a lot of problems with him, obviously, and clearly what's been going on with COVID is, that's real. There's no question about that. And yet we have the Hashem angle here, which is he seems to be blessing all these people with success, keeping them in power, keeping us from interfering with all their machinations. And so, it's like I want to be Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai coming out of the cave and just burning everybody with my gaze, who isn't not my San Francisco gaze, my gaze as in, looking upon someone judgmentally and having a column of fire incinerate them. Okay, I would like to have that, but God told me go back to my cave. Right? So
incinerate them with your gaze.
Dealing with God is infuriating. Okay, but he's in charge. It's the truth. I'm not trying to be cute here. It's the truth. Okay, so he's in charge and he's blessing them and keeping. I don't know what his plan is, whatever. But
he wants us to do something. He wants us to do something. That's the answer. Sorry, Fish.
I'm sorry, Mordechai. That's why. That's the whole point of everything. How could that possibly be? Do something.
Well, you're the Lubavitcher.
Do what? What?
First of all, increase in Torah and mitzvahs, but for the purpose of understanding that the more that I do that, the more that I give to that side, I take away from the foolishness side of myself that's ready to hear every dumb little thing that they put in front of my nose.
That's the case. We've been doing it. That's the case, and we've been doing it.
So Mordechai.
Last thing. So Netanyahu is obviously given a chance to do something right. For some reason, it seemed the Rebbe seemed to have recognized it back in the day that God was going to give Netanyahu like endless opportunities to do one thing right. We know he's good at yapping. We know he's good at telling us what we want to hear. But is he ever going to do even one of those things? So if he doesn't give back the Philadelphia corridor, that might be his one thing. So we have to sit back and watch him, see if he's going to take that one opportunity, hopefully the last one.
Well, I just want to remind everybody to watch the video that I dropped in the chat here, where you will see to what convoluted extents leaders are willing to go to stage things and to make it look like X, Y, Z. Philadelphia corridor is only one little detail in the entire long history. These things have repeated themselves over and over and over again. 5 years ago, there was another ceasefire.
Big detail. That's where they smuggle the weapons from.
Gentlemen, can I ask Gentlemen, can I ask a question? And you're talking about Torah and we have to do Torah mitzvahs. You know, Mordechai, what I notice in all these protests from the left wing, both in American Jews or people with Jewish last names, and in America, but also in Israel. In Israel, I noticed that there are some of them, right, who have enough what's called Torah vernacular, where they say, well, these are secular people now who don't, more often than not, don't give a damn about Torah. Well, it's a mitzvah to return, the captives, right? In America, you often hear they'll hold up a sign at these protests saying "Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof." Okay, so what is the sentence right after Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof? You shall occupy your land that God gave you. I'm just paraphrasing, right? I don't know the exact lashon. What is the provision of what these Israelis want us to return the captives? Only if it doesn't endanger, like there's like halachic things going on over there. There's conditions. Only if it doesn't endanger Jews, right? So in Israel we have a network. There's a network. I don't know when they started. Channel 14. It's like the Patriot channel, right? And you have religious people there. You have right-wing people, so-called right-wing people, religious people. What's stopping one religious person? One doesn't have to be. Could be Hardal, Haredi, Hasidish. I don't care what he is. I don't care what denomination of Orthodoxy he comes from. Just go and say, hey guys, I hear you guys talking about returning captives, but here's what the Torah says. Right? Let's if you want to talk Torah, we can talk Torah. And this is blasted to the entire country, just like Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof. But here's what it says right after Tzedek Tzedek Tirdof. Oh, Judea and Samaria. Oh, wait a minute. But you want Tzedek Tzedek Tirdof? Well, we got Tzedek Tzedek Tirdof here. Let's talk Torah to the whole nation.
Popularity is in inverse proportion to truth. So there are people who are speaking the truth, but the more they speak it, the less popular or the smaller audiences they have. But that's fine because we as Jews are not necessarily impressed by size or numbers or power or speed or who has the majority. Because if we were impressed by that, so we should just go run and become Christians. We're not impressed by that. So, yeah, but the Israelis, look, there are different segments of the Israeli population, and every one of them sort of plays his role. Everything is orchestrated from the propaganda arms of the United States, and the best thing is just not to feed into it, but to find our own center of everything, of being. We have something. They're able to use us because we have a true Torah. In other words, the reason why all of these things are directed at us, it all comes from the Torah, and to the extent that we kept the Torah, that's how much we're immune from these attacks. And to the extent that we went away from the Torah, so these are the claims that they make on us. I don't know if that relates exactly to what you're asking, but
I mean, it's not claims at us. It's more like we just have to fill in the gaps. They're saying they're bringing up legitimate I guess questions, or they're bringing up legitimate concepts, but their understanding of it is it's they have it's not even limited Torah. It's just like they're not finishing the sentence. They're basically starting the first half of the sentence, and the second half of the sentence they're missing. And if all you got to do is just go on television and say, well, here's the rest of that sentence, or here's the provision for that, what you're asking about, and that's it. And now we have a national conversation. Instead of talking about, well, we're right wing, and here's how you got to fight, the Arabs, and you can't be naive, and blah, blah, blah. We know all that stuff. It doesn't speak to those people. Telling these people about their naivete, it infuriates them more, and it makes them even more, go ahead with their stupid ideology.
I'll give an example. I hope he will forgive me for mentioning him, but I think that Rav Hanania Weissman would tell them the truth. But Rav Hanania Weissman is never going to be popular enough to be put in the position of one of these illustrious celebrity leaders who really could get to those numbers, and put things straight. There are people speaking the truth, but
Yeah,
people just don't want to hear the truth.
I have to actually, I have to take my wife and child home because it's time for his nap. So, can I say just a couple of thoughts? Before I have a hard stop. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, we should also stop soon. Yeah.
We have we have let's boil it down. So we have really only two things going on. We have a completely captive system, which it's a lot like what the pre-flood generations did, civilizations did. They tried to create their own system within God's system, their own world within God's world. That's actually what the Mephorshim say, and Kabbalah says that they were using shir koma to change the very fabric of reality, because they understood how, people knew how God's operating system language, they knew how to affect reality through things that God had taught Adam, and they received that from that, and they wanted to use that knowledge to turn against God. So the system that we're dealing with, especially the one which disseminates information, is precisely the same thing as what they did in the pre-flood. Okay, so anybody who's outside of that system, they won't let you in. They won't let Hananiah Weisberg for a lot of reasons. Okay. And one of them is because he says something true every now and then. So anybody who says something true every now and then can't get anywhere near having a voice. They just won't allow that. Why would they let you in and to say anything that makes sense? Because that's going to expose them. They're not going to promote you. They're not going to allow. Okay, so that's clear. And the people who supposedly are up there, those tokens, those are sellout whores. I'm sorry, that's where they are. Okay, let's enough with this. Okay, so what can we do? We can do, we can create our own, do you know John Galt? Create our own little enclave, watch the world burn down
Yes.
around. Okay.
Well,
So
that book
that's
originally was
what we're
called The
talking about
Strike.
here.
It was a strike. We can go on strike.
Yeah. So the best thing that can result from that is we build our own little secret hidden society, and those who have accidentally stumbled upon us, they can benefit from having some good information. Like those who stumbled upon my brother, they didn't die, right? They didn't poison themselves. That's what I'm talking about. So, but how many did? I've been screaming for 2 years. My brother started screaming 4 years ago, and there's 7 billion people in the world, maybe more. I think 6 billion, 999 million still don't know anything about it. Okay, so I'm not great at math, but it's something like that. Okay, so their ability to keep a lid on reality and on anything useful that benefits mankind is pretty good. So there's two things that are going on. We have to build our own little enclave, which is what's been going on. That's what this is. These podcasts and communities, and and then hope that God actually steps in and maybe cracks that dome that they built. That city. Their own little colony that's shielded from God's influence, and that's where we are. That's called Mashiach. I mean, it has to be. So I don't know. I don't know how useful it is what I just said. Truth is, but it is the truth. It really is the boiled down truth. I just don't know how to continue the conversation after you say that. What more is there to say?
Well, why don't we open it up to the studio audience? We're calling if there are any comments or questions anyone wants to weigh in, and then we can.
Yes, Rivka, Charlene, Cynthia, go ahead. You can unmute yourselves.
May I ask a question? Can you hear me?
Please, yes, we hear you.
Do you pay property tax in Israel?
Excuse me?
Is there a property tax?
Of course.
Yes, even though there's no property, but yeah.
It's called Arnona, and you pay taxes for land that's owned by the government. Yes.
Okay. Then truly what we do not have what you had in the Torah, where people could own property and work the property, because I see in Torah that even the king didn't have a right to property that wasn't his, that people had property rights in the Torah. I don't know if you can track with me. What I am trying to say is government has more power and more ownership because we have no property rights of any kind, not even to our own labor. The fruit of the labor is a gift from God. We don't even have that.
That's right. It's a very profound concept, actually. I mean, that's have you been reading Richard Weaver? Did you is that something that you looked into?
No, I don't know who that is. It comes strictly from praying, reading the Bible, and seeing our situation, that we're all owned. We don't even get to have the capital of our labor. We can't own our property.
There was an American, yeah. I just wanted to say there was an American philosopher in the 1940s, 50s named Richard Weaver. He was actually from the South, from the Southern tradition of rhetoric, and I mean in the positive sense. And he wrote a book called Ideas Have Consequences, an excellent book. And in his final chapter there, where he talks a little bit about solutions, I mean, one has to remember this book was written in the 50s, the 1950s. And if you read it, you won't believe it. You won't believe what he's describing. But the last chapter is called The Last Metaphysical Right. And what is the last metaphysical right? That's property ownership. That's land ownership. And he explains how that is the last thing that is basically standing between the complete disintegration of society, according to all the other concepts that he discussed in the book there. But I recommend it to you because the things that you just said, it sounds as though you've been reading him anyway. So Ideas Have Consequences by Richard Weaver.
I'm definitely going to look for that book. Ideas Have Consequences. It sounds like it would clarify things that we're seeing and Cynthia's seeing.
Right.
I wanted to say I've learned a lot from the discussion, and especially what's going to stick with me is Frank's observations. He said about our being in a captive system. This is one reason that the common person can't get anywhere protesting. In America, we had the Tea Party movement, and they got nowhere. But then because the people are not of means, and they don't have a means to mobilize. What could mobilize them and mobilize the early Americans was the pulpit. The pulpits were very active in supporting the American Revolution, but our pulpits now are completely muted, and they've become it's convenient for them to.
They've been co-opted.
Yeah, and so how can the people mobilize? Well, they're part of a captive system. Along came a billionaire, Donald Trump, with independent means, and he has mobilized the people. I'm not sure that he has a tremendous response because of his independent means. He's being cut down, and his plan of action, his solutions don't have the clarity that's needed. But it just goes to show that you have to be a person of means. What's missing is leadership, independent leadership. People are compromised because of parnasa, among other things, parnasa and status. And the other thing that Frank said was about the sin of ignorance. Is that how you phrase it, or was it the sin of naivety, Frank?
Frank is near
ignorance.
Yes.
It was a difficult medicine to go down, bitter medicine to go down, but very hard sayings. But I think it is the bottom line. I really think that is the fact. He said that to be ignorant is a sin. You can't just not pay attention. Or the saying that you had, Mordechai, of what was it? Some kind of politics.
I'm not sure.
Politics. You said something like 1 minute politics. Something like,
Fast food politics. Fast
oh,
food
yeah,
politics.
that's it. Thank you. I was going to forget it. Fast food politics. That
Yes.
explains it. That's how we stay ignorant, because we don't think a second time, as Thomas Sowell said. And we just go on feeling like, if okay, we just go out and vote and ignore what else happens. But then somehow we expect that we should have the good life. We should be, God is going to protect us. No, we have a duty, and God gave us a brain. And since we said we want to choose, He commands us to choose, that you have to be bothered to inform yourself. And here again is where the pulpits are falling down, the Christian pulpits, and also the bemis, that they feel, oh, that's political, and I'm going to separate the religious, and we're just going to talk about as you said, today's Torah portion speaks specifically to the shedding of innocent blood, and how the judges and the governors have a duty to execute judgment. Otherwise, that innocent blood clings to you. So you must purge it, and don't make.
Yes.
Okay, well, those were all the different things you discussed that were very helpful to me, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you for those
you.
observations.
Yeah,
It's very,
may I give everybody just kind of some food for thought, or maybe like a hope, or quote unquote hope?
give us some parting words.
I posted a video in the chat. It's Rabbi Raskin, Aaron Raskin. He's in Brooklyn. He's a Chabad rabbi, but he, appeals to everybody, or like to think that he would. And he speaks about the upcoming year 5785, and I guess the gematrias that correspond to the number of the year speak to the fact that it's a year. I mean, he calls it, the year of Hesed, the year of kindness on Hashem's part, but it's also the year of see, it says also the pei and the hey, the 88.5 allude to the divine mouth, the knowledge of the oral Torah, and the final hey alludes to the letter of creation, and number 5 alluding to the 5 levels of kindness. But he was speaking about how people would, like Hashem himself, because we're talking about, like, what can we do? What can we do? People are blind, this and that. He was basically saying in the beginning of the video that Hashem himself will, allow people to see two things: how everything is hashgacha pratis, how everything is divine providence, more so, right? Through kind of things that happen. I mean, I interpret it this way: through things that happen, in front of our eyes, around the world, and all these human events. But also he would allow us to see, in a way, what Mashiach is already doing. If not see Mashiach himself, if not, I mean, God forbid, not read Mashiach himself, but already what Mashiach is already working, to see it more. So I feel like people, like even religious people, I've been watching religious people. And Frank and I talk about this all the time, how people are just, they're like crestfallen. They've seen it before, where they're like, oh man, we thought this was Mashiach, we thought this was Geula, and now people are just like, you know what, forget about this Mashiach stuff, forget about this Geula stuff. Like, when he comes, let's just do mitzvahs and Torah, So I feel like if Hashem just, opens a little crack for people to see, well, wait a minute, like, here's the Shkacha Pratis, and we already saw it with the whole Trump thing and how they tried to kill him, but that's more for people who have the eyes in America. But like, if Hashem just shows everybody, whoa, like, okay, something's going on here, that like, this is supernatural, even if it's not like breaking nature, but it is supernatural, even by derech hateva, then people are like, okay, now we have kind of not carte blanche, but we can now mobilize, maybe. Now we can say what we want to say. We can go on channel 14 and talk about this and talk about that, as opposed to just sitting and being afraid of, their own shadow because of, Yitzhak Rabin and Yigal Amir and all the other stuff. So that was my interpretation of that.
Wow. I think maybe it's a good signal, a good note to end on. Like you say, we're all Well, I thank everyone for joining us. Lowell, thanks for providing
Thank you.
being the host for this, and and especially
Well,
to the people, the great questions.
all any of us can do is, let me check my sound level. Yeah, that's right. Is what we can do. So I have two things to say. It was about 1910 in Vienna. There was a this is like a apocryphal story. This has actually happened. There were two Austro-Hungarian generals talking to each other about the danger of communism, socialism, anarchism. We forget it now, but in the 1800s, many European royalty and people in positions of authority were assassinated by anarchists. The anarchist movement, whatever it was real. A lot of the czars getting blown up, Kaiser, I mean, a lot of people were getting killed. So that was a real fear. So anyway, it was 1910. And one of the Austro-Hungarian generals said to the other, I'm concerned about the threat to our empire of communist socialists and other radicals. And remember, in 1910, the empires seemed pretty stable. Actually, they were pretty stable, and they were all pretty good, especially compared to what came after them. So the other general looked at him and said, and who is to make this revolution? Herr Trotsky sitting in the Café Central? Well, he did. And Trotsky, Leon Bronstein, you look at him, it was 1903. What did he cover? The Zionist Congress. He was a reporter for some socialist. He took the bus to go from one city to the other. He was a journalist, and he was a revolutionary. He also turned out to be a military genius. I mean, you wouldn't have thought looking at him. He was a military genius. He led the Red Armies to victory. So he did make that revolution. And I'm reminded of that, thinking of people today who, and then there's also from physics, this is actually real. And I repeat it many times in our programs. A butterfly flapping its wings in Tokyo can cause an avalanche in Tierra del Fuego in Argentina. Drop the stone in the water and the waves go out. This is going on all the time with all of us. Our thoughts, words, feelings, and actions are far more powerful. Anyone of the 9 billion humans than we know. And therefore, they're very important. And the Sitra Achra, or the serpent, or whatever it is, the force of the others, no, you're nobody, you're nothing, you don't make any difference, is exactly what that force, don't even bother, don't try. The moment people, wait a second, I'm a butterfly, my words, actions, and thoughts and feelings do make a difference, then the tyrants start to tremble because they don't want that. I'll give you one simple example of one person who saw something which led to something very serious. It was April 1941. A Norwegian partisan noticed there were 2 German warships in the harbor. And he realized one of them was the new German super battleship called the Bismarck. So he went up to the mountainside overlooking the bay, and he started in his little hut with his, what do you call that, Morse code, to send a message to British intelligence. And in it, he said, I see 2 ships in the harbor. One is the Prince Eugen, I think, and the other is at that moment, German troops broke in and shot and killed him. So the British said, I wonder what's there. Let's send some spy planes out to have a look. And it's the Bismarck. And based on that, watch the film 1960. The 1960 war movies are very low on blood and gore and more on content and story. I think it's a docudrama. It's terrifically done about to sink the Bismarck. And the Bismarck was out in the open waters at the time it was spotted. And then it had a conflict that blew up the great British battleship, the Hood, and wounded the Prince of Wales, which it didn't destroy, but itself got injured and was limping back to France. And the British organized a manhunt of ships and planes and sunk it, all because one guy went up to a hut and said, I see something in the harbor. So no one should ever think, even in Israel, the system, I like my florid descriptions are small-time Stalinist shtetl schlepperocracy. I made that one up myself. Our Erev Rav mixed multitude, Sabatian Frankists, Chaim Rumkowski, Ghetto Judenrat, Capoocracy, NWO, CFR, WAEF, vassal puppet regime. I think that covers most of the main points. They want the slave population to think it doesn't matter what you do. We've got it all sewed up since the Freemason British brought in the Sabatian and Frankist labor Zionists, and we bought out everybody. Don't even try. That's what they want people to think. And the system is set up that you can have all the demonstrations, you won't make any difference. That's true. What could have an effect is when the money starts to get shut off. Let's say President Trump, with everything thrown against him, becomes president. I mean, he still is the president, but actually has a third term, gets in and survives everything that's going to throw everything they can at him, gets in the saddle and is in the cockpit and says, okay, I got a better idea what's going over there in your little Potemkin village fantasy land. We're not giving anyone a blank check anymore. I want to know where the money's going. Everywhere. Don't say, well, 2 billion disappeared in the trillion. We don't know in the Pentagon. That's going to end. We're going to have very solid accounting. I want to know where's the money going in Israel. Well, most of the Israeli government institutions, the Hamas and the Philistine chaos, are money laundering operations. They are assets. Hamas is an asset of the Anglo-American oil and banking establishment. It's a Wahhabi operation. All Wahhabi operations, the Boko Haram and murdering people in Nigeria, they're assets. Follow the money, follow the ideas, follow the bodies, follow the everything. Now, if you get someone in charge in America, says, okay, I'm turning off the money, then these guys are in big trouble. They don't shut down, break my rice bowl. Keep it up. So hopefully when he gets in order to have real change here, one way is we're shutting down them. We're not giving you blank checks anymore. We want to know, where's the money going? Where's the money going? Yes, I know what Rav Alon Anava and Rabbi Hanani Weitzman say, and they're right. Most of us can't really do anything, Torah study, prayer, and good deeds. That's certainly true. But at least we can say what we see and we hear. You never know who's listening. Like when Hanani posted that video on his Rumble channel from October 7th, from Hamas's own body cam, showing there are people speaking, Israelis speaking in Hebrew, and guys speaking in English, and Caucasians in blue button-down shirts. Without going into detail, in our little listening post here, broadcasting and watching from the Hill of the Priests opposite Mount Moriah and Mount Zion, I know for a fact there are people, and you know who some of them are, who are listening very carefully, because every king needs a court jester. Will someone not lie to me and tell me the truth? And they know, those people know, and you know who some of them are. And the enemy also knows who some of them are. No, to the extent that we can, we will tell you what we know to be the truth. And nobody can say, well, it's anti-Semitism, or you're self-hating Jews, or you. No, we're just going to, no, we are biblical Zionists based on the Torah, the prophets, the writings, and the sages. Or as Frank said about Dr. Zelenko, a Talmudic Jew. That's why now in our announcements for our weekly medical fellowship seminar, I say American Jewish immigrant success story, Talmudic Jew, just to annoy the other side. One other point. There's a really good movie, what's it called? The Fixer, about the Mendel Bilas trial of 1903, starring Alan Bates as Mendel Bilas. In Ukraine, which city he's accused of ritual murder. And amazingly, you never know when people will do the right thing. A jury of Ukrainian peasants acquitted him. Now, they all had to go home to their communities and the churches. That was you acquitted that Jid. You're not standing up for the Ukrainian Russian Orthodox Church and our people. That's not the point. In the movie, there's a scene where they're trying in jail. Mendel Bilas, Alan Bates is in jail. They want him to convert to Russian Orthodox or Ukrainian Orthodox Christianity. So he decides he's going to have a little fun with them. He says, okay, I'll do it. So they arrange one day. The priest comes in with the altar boys, the choir boys, they're singing, they're chanting. And then they open the door to his cell. And he turns and smiles at them. He has on a talis, tefillin, and he looks like the most Jewishy Jew. And you see this scene. I really should play it in one of our programs. The priest stops and looks at him and goes, like that, like he saw a demon. And then the guards come in and beat up Mendel Bilas. So I want to have that result with some of our friends. So hopefully they'll have heart attacks and drop dead. Look, I know of a case in a small village, I won't say it is in Tyrol, where the local village priest didn't like Jews, said to a Tyrolean man in public, your daughter converted to Judaism. So the father, who had been in World War II in the Wehrmacht, screamed at the Pope, not the Pope, the priest. And so maybe the Jews are right. The priest did eventually die of multiple heart attacks, and I'd like to think that helped speed him on his way to hell. So, oh, you got to go. We all got to go. It's 8 o'clock, and anyway, it's 2 minutes after 8 for. We use this room also to put the children to sleep. So never think no one's listening. It's true in our system here in Israel, but there might be people outside Israel who control money or weapons who are listening, who have values and street smart, and say, no, we don't want to be friars and suckers with the Israeli system. Okay, that's all I want to say for now. We will see everybody in a month, right before Rosh Hashanah, and shalom from New Jersey and somewhere in Samaria and Jerusalem. Okay, stop recording and